I'm just gonna hold my little creativity crystal that I bought the other day before I get started here. Okay, it's working. It's activated. Before I get started, could you please do me a huge favor? Could you hit that subscribe button, and then can you hit that notification button? That'll let you know every time I've created any new content. I try to put something up like a few times a week. I'm new at this. It's a little choppy. It's getting better. Thank you for your feedback and your comments. I love, love, love all of that energy coming my way. It just fuels me to keep creating more content like this. You might be asking what this is about. I was in a really terrible cycling accident in the beginning of the year, so that's what that is. So I hope it doesn't become a distraction. In fact, someone suggested that I cover it up, but you know what? I am not going to, because this is a reminder that I am imperfect, and I hope by my addressing the fact that I'm imperfect, that you too feel comfortable and safe about addressing these issues that are kind of big concepts and maybe a little emotional and sensitive. You know what? We are imperfect people, and this scar is proof of it. But here I am today. I'm making this content, and I hope you enjoy it. If you are feeling stuck, if you are feeling like you cannot make any progress towards your goals, if you feel like it's a lost cause, then this video is for you. I'm going to talk about ways that you can practically change how you think so that you can better navigate those voices in your head that tell you that you are no good and that you can't do it. Hi, I'm Manny Apolonio. I'm a certified financial planner, and I'm also a financial independence coach. And that means that I help my clients get to a place where they are on the path to financial independence if they're not already there. Welcome back to my channel. On this channel, we talk about the psychology of money and practical ways that you can make better decisions with yours. In this sage powers that we're going to use as the antidote to the voices of our saboteurs. And they are: 1, we're going to empathize. 2, we're going to explore. 3, we're going to innovate. 4, we're going to navigate. And 5, we're going to activate. They'll make a lot more sense after we go through each one of them. If you want to know how to quiet the voice of your saboteurs, the easiest way to do that is by practicing mindfulness. Now, it sounds so simple, but I'll give you techniques that work for me, that might work for you, so that you can set aside that critical voice within you, focus on what's really important, and come up with better ways to tackle your issue or circumstance. When you're in a situation of high stress and anxiety, there's a part of your brain that kicks into action, which is the survival mode. In survival mode, you'll either fight, you will flight, or you will freeze. And when your body or when your mind is in that mode, the best solutions and ideas and your ability to brainstorm is completely shut off. That part of your brain, the middle prefrontal cortex, that's the part of your brain that operates a little bit more slowly. And so if you're in a situation of high stress and anxiety, that part of your brain is going to shut down, because your brain is saying, hey, I need to send all my brain power towards those functions that get me out of this situation or into fight mode as fast as possible. The problem with that is if you are constantly under stress or anxiety, you're not going to come up with the best ideas. If you're already a super highly successful person, you're probably so skeptical about this concept of using a mindfulness technique to quiet your inner judge or your inner critic, your saboteur's voice. I get it. Because for me too, that judge and that critic has pushed me, and I've gotten to a certain place of success, and it's helped, but now it's hindering me because that same voice is telling me that I can't produce YouTube content that's going to be useful for a audience. And I just got a tinge of that voice in my head, and I have to practice this. I have to close my eyes. I have to take a deep breath, and then I have to focus on my 5 senses. I have to focus on what I feel and I feel my fingertips on the top of this table and the heat of my palms against the coolness of this table. Okay, you're probably thinking, what is he doing? He looks so crazy. What I've done there is I've interrupted that inner critic by focusing on my five senses. So focusing on a physical sensation within my body can help interrupt that flow of negative thinking into a recognition of a physical sensation. Essentially, you're practicing a little bit of mindfulness each time that negative thought comes in. What you're trying to do is you're trying to strengthen the neural pathways within your brain that access your prefrontal cortex. In there, that's where your best ideas live. And you can't access that part of your brain when you're under constant stress and anxiety. Your brain is in survival mode. You're in flight, fight, or freeze. Or when your brain is primed to react with only those three functions, guess what? That's all you're going to get. The saboteur's voice lives in the survival mind because the saboteur is trying to keep you safe. Now, we are not hunter-gatherers and we're not out there on the African savanna trying to survive. You are now living in the 21st century and you have different challenges today. Your success in likely your professional pursuit is not going to kill you necessarily if you get it wrong. But the brain doesn't know that. The brain just thinks, I have to get this right to survive. When you've strengthened that neural pathway that gets you from negative thought to mindfulness, you strengthen the ability to go from mindfulness to my best ideas. And I'll talk about 5 ways that you can go from that mindfulness technique or that place of mindfulness to a technique that will help. The 5 techniques, as described by Shirzad Chamine in his book, Positive Intelligence, you need to get your hands on this book by Shirzad Chamine because everything that I say and everything that comes out of my mouth is like my interpretation of the learnings and teachings of this book. I am like a complete evangelist. I don't have like a special connection to this person besides the fact that I admire the work, but there's so much good that I've gained from it that I have to share it with you. So 5 techniques that you can use to go from negative thought to mindfulness to a better outcome. So number 1, empathize. We use this one when our emotional reserves are running low. You're like burnt out almost. Your saboteur has just been running its mouth and you are drained. And the tactic here is to talk to yourself as if you were a child. And how would you comfort a child experiencing the same troubles you're experiencing right now? The chances are you're not going to use the same voice as the saboteur. Berating a child is not going to get the child motivated toward better action. It might just damage and even traumatize the child. And that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves when we're allowing ourselves to talk so poorly to ourselves. So imagine yourself as a child and talk them through what is going on and allow yourself to empathize with that child. In turn, what you're doing is you're empathizing with yourself, but by allowing yourself to separate yourself from the child and the saboteur, that conversation can be a lot more fruitful. Maybe your words of encouragement and your ability to be compassionate might serve first to comfort that person, allow them to relax, get out of that stressed out mind, get out of that survival mind, because then they're able to access their middle prefrontal cortex and get access to those better ideas. When my internal judge and critic is firing away, it is a barrage of negativity and it is strong. And I would never talk to a friend the way I talk to myself. And it's such a shame because I'm such a nice friend, I think. You're gonna have to ask my friends, but I do think that I'm really empathetic with them. But it's so difficult for me to be empathetic with myself. But I've gotten better about doing it. And the way I can do it is if I separate myself, my judge, and this childlike version of myself. Okay, so hear me out. Take this, for example. Let's say you've run up a balance on a credit card and your goal is to keep your debt down or not to have any debt at all, yet you found yourself in a situation where you have debt. The judgmental voice might be saying, there you go again, spending money you don't have, buying things you don't need, you're so terrible with money. Okay? Then you have the voice of the sage, the wise voice, the wisdom within you that is empathetic to comfort that child who is also looking at the same situation. So I would say it's so hard, even in this example, for me to come up with that empathetic voice. It's such a practice. It is something that it's something that gets better with time, being able to switch to that, like, okay, if a child had done this, how would I comfort this child? I would say you don't have to beat yourself up because it's the best you knew how to handle the situation when the situation arose. That voice is so different from the judgmental voice that just made the broad general statement that you're terrible with money. If I believe the voice that says that I'm terrible with money, well, guess what the result will be? It will come true. The saboteur is there to sabotage me. And the saboteur does not like change. Saboteur wants to keep things just the way they are. Sage power number 2, explore. You're going to use this one when you need more information. And sometimes it's hard to get more information about a specific situation if you're judging it the entire time. What I want you to do is go in there with the lens of like an anthropologist, an explorer. And you're going in there like with a video recorder and you're there to like collect facts and not make judgments. How do I look at my current situation or my current challenge with the eyes of like an anthropologist? Looking at the situation with curiosity. Okay, so now we approach the issue of this accumulated credit card debt with curiosity. And in not like a judgmental way, but just looking at it like, oh, like what were the circumstances that led up to that? Were you happy or sad when you made those purchases? Or were you with someone when you made those purchases? Were they made to appease someone else? Were you happy? Were you sad? How did we get here? What can I witness from this situation? And it's not with the voice of judgment. It's with the voice of curiosity. When there's judgment in the room, it kind of like sucks up all of the air in the room. And the voice of curiosity isn't even able to just take a look at the situation with a perspective that says, okay, what's there to be gained from this situation? What are the 3 gifts of this situation? You know, I could take a look at it and be like, okay, this might be the opportunity where I finally come up with a plan to tackle my debt. This might be the situation when I really understand how the interest on my credit card works. And this might be the time and place that I start working with a budget. But if I look at it through the lens of curiosity, this issue of accumulated credit card debt, I can look at it and ask all of those other questions that help me gather more information so I can make a better decision. Okay, so now we're on to the 3rd method, which is to innovate or to think outside of the box. Like I said before, if you're only listening to the judge, the saboteur, that voice is not going to come up with constructive ways to tackle this issue. The voice of the saboteur is actually really destructive because it ends up turning off that function in your brain that allows you to think in a more creative way. The way you access the creative mind is by using this technique called yes and. That is one way you can get yourself out of this mind of allowing the judge to kind of dictate what to do. The yes and technique to collect as many ideas as possible. Now, a lot are going to be silly, a lot are going to be not useful, but what you're doing is you're training the part of your brain that just accesses ideas. Because if you get to the mode where you're coming up with an idea and then judging it immediately, you're already starting to diminish your ability to create new ideas. Think about like if you're in a conference room and you're in a meeting with other coworkers and you're asked to brainstorm on an idea and someone says, here's my idea. And another person from the other side of the room says, oh, that's a terrible idea. That cohesion within the room, that ability to speak freely and think creatively has already been stifled by that one negative comment, because the rest of the participants in that room are going to be less willing to come up with ideas, or at least share their ideas, because they're afraid of being judged. The same goes for the conversation with our brain. There's the sage, the wise part of your brain that's trying to come up with ideas to tackle this issue of this accumulated debt. Whereas you have the voice of your saboteur that says, well, okay, thank you, sage, for that idea, but here's why it's not going to work. And the result is inaction or no action at all, because you've already negated every solution before you've even given it a shot. In Innovate mode, you are trying to train your brain to just come up with as many ideas as possible. And you're doing that by suspending the voice of the judge as much as possible so you can let these ideas flow freely from your mind. And you do that by using yes and. And the way that yes and works is that you appreciate every idea that the sage comes up with. You can decide later whether or not you go through with it or if whether or not it's a good idea, but every idea comes forward and you appreciate each one. So it goes something like this. Why don't we start with a budget? Yes, and what I like about a budget is that we'll be more clear about where our money is being spent. We could also try cutting up a credit card so that we can prevent our future spending. Yes, what I like about that is exactly that. We'll prevent future spending. We could also try setting up an emergency fund. Yes, what I like about an emergency fund is if there is an emergency, I don't have to put it on a credit card. I can just dip into the savings that I've set aside for this emergency and not incur new debt. What I like about that is I don't have to go into debt to solve a urgent financial issue. So you see how this goes. It's yes and then you have to appreciate what you like about it, and then you can add on to it. Well, I could first come up with an emergency fund. Yes, when you have enough money in your emergency fund, you can start tackling the credit card with the highest interest. Yes, and I can also create a budget so that I don't find myself in this situation again. Now, you see the voice of judgment crept in. It is so sneaky. So let me correct that. How about the budget will help? Yes, and I'm going to download this app to track my expenses. Yes, and I'm going to call a friend every time I have the urge to spend money. Yes, and I'm going to continue to watch YouTube videos that Manny produces so I can better understand how I manage myself, my thoughts, and my money. Yes, and I'm only going to use cash from now on. Yes, and I will collect all of the change that I use and save it into a jar, and everything that's in that jar gets used to pay my credit cards. Yes, and I'm not going to walk into that store. Yes, and I'm going to ask myself every time I make a purchase what my intentions are. You get the idea that the ideas are just allowed to free flow and you're not allowed to judge them right away. By doing that, you're beginning to access that part of your brain that comes up with creative solutions. I say this time and time again, you are born naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. That means that the solution for your specific situation resides within you already. You just need to awaken that part of you. And if the saboteur's voice is so loud, you're never going to be able to awaken that voice within you that has the solution. With number 4, we're going to use Navigate, which is the sage power that has you access your inner compass, which is guided by your deeply held values. And you have the situation that's right in front of you, and you flash forward to a future version of you, maybe when you're elderly and you're looking back at the situation and you ask yourself, okay, what's important about this situation and what is the way I wish I had conducted myself in this situation? And what that does is it strips away all of these little trivial comments and criticisms that your saboteur is giving you. And it gets you closer to like those deeply held values, because when you're in the future looking back at the situation, you're less likely to be hung up on all the little trivial details that your saboteur wants you to pay attention to in order to sabotage you and keep you stuck. So what you're doing in that is you're cultivating your ability to access your personally held values as like a barometer of whether or not you take on this activity or action. When your saboteur is alive and well and active, quite the opposite is happening in your life. You're likely stuck in a current situation that's less than ideal, and you are unwilling or unable to make a decision that moves you forward. So, number 5 is activate. What you are trying to preempt is you're trying to get in front of those negative voices so that you can weaken them when they start to come your way. And you're going to say, I know what my saboteur is going to say. My saboteur is going to say, you're going to fail at this again. You don't know what you're doing. You should just give up. If you know that the saboteur is going to come up with those reactions to your ideas, if you're hypervigilant, hyper-rational, a stickler, a victim, imagine for yourself what those saboteurs are going to say. And you can more easily recognize that it is the voice of the saboteur and just like super focus on what it is you have in front of you that you are trying to achieve. Okay, so let's recap. You're going to first start with your mindfulness practice to get you off of this like merry-go-round of negative saboteur talk. So again, that is the practice of saying, oh, I recognize the voice of the saboteur. I'm instead going to focus on a physical sensation that I am sensing right now. What that does is it interrupts your brain's focus on this negative thought spiral. And as this mindfulness technique becomes more and more second nature to you, you're gonna find yourself in like a flow around this decision making that feels authentic to you, and it's gonna take practice to get you there, and it doesn't happen overnight. This is like a skill like any other skill. It's gonna take time for you to develop it, and you're gonna need practice, just like you go to the gym to get strong. So number 1, empathize. We use this one when our emotional reserves are running low. You're like burnt out almost. Your saboteur has just been running its mouth and you are drained. And the tactic here is to talk to yourself as if you were a child. And how would you comfort a child experiencing the same troubles you're experiencing right now? The chances are you're not going to use the same voice as the saboteur. Berating a child is not going to get the child motivated toward better action. It might just damage and even traumatize the child. And that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves when we're allowing ourselves to talk so poorly to ourselves. So imagine yourself as a child and talk them through what is going on and allow yourself to empathize with that child. In turn, what you're doing is you're empathizing with yourself, but by allowing yourself to separate yourself from the child and the saboteur, that conversation can be a lot more fruitful, stronger. So number 1, empathize. We use this one when our emotional reserves are running low. You're like burnt out almost. Your saboteur has just been running its mouth and you are drained. And the tactic here is to talk to yourself as if you were a child. And how would you comfort a child experiencing the same troubles you're experiencing right now? the chances are you're not going to use the same voice as the saboteur. Berating a child is not going to get the child motivated toward better action. It might just damage and even traumatize the child. And that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves when we're allowing ourselves to talk so poorly to ourselves. So imagine yourself as a child and talk them through what is going on and allow yourself to empathize with that child. In turn, what you're doing is you're empathizing with yourself, but by allowing yourself to separate yourself from the child and the saboteur, that conversation can be a lot more fruitful. You're going to have to practice this muscle inside your brain. Like I said, you're going to strengthen that neural pathway in your brain. Give it a shot. Next time you hear yourself talking negatively. So, number 1, empathize. We use this one when our emotional reserves are running low. You're like burnt out almost. Your saboteur has just been running its mouth and you are drained. And the tactic here is to talk to yourself as if you were a child. And how would you comfort a child experiencing the same troubles you're experiencing right now? The chances are you're not going to use the same voice as the saboteur. Berating a child is not going to get the child motivated toward better action. It might just damage and even traumatize the child. And that's exactly what we're doing to ourselves when we're allowing ourselves to talk so poorly to ourselves. So imagine yourself as a child and talk them through what is going on and allow yourself to empathize with that child. In turn, what you're doing is you're empathizing with yourself, but by allowing yourself to separate yourself from the child and the saboteur, that conversation can be a lot more fruitful. Take a break. Touch a table and think of me. Thank you for watching the video. I hope that conversation about mindfulness and 5 different techniques that you can use to combat the voices of your saboteur was useful to you. I would love to hear your feedback. Go ahead and put them down there in the comment section below. And while you're there, could you please hit the subscribe button if you haven't already? And also, make sure you hit that notification button, that bell. That'll let you know every time I've created every new content. I try to put something up a few times a week, so you don't want to miss what I come up with next. I'll see you next time.